So now non-citizens have the right to vote. In New York City, they're declaring this such a victory. 800,000 people that are living in New York that are not citizens of the United States of America. They're dreamers, they're green card holders. They now can vote in New York City elections. And New York City thinks this is a real win. This is actually the beginning of a serious decline in our country, and I am going to explain why. We're going to talk about that, plus this mass inflation that really, we haven't seen anything like this since the likes of the 1980s. It really is going to be a political problem for Joe Biden and Jussie Smollett. You know, there's quite a difference, shall we say, in the reaction from leftist politicians to Kyle Rittenhouse versus Jussie Smollett. But look at what Jussie Smollett was actually trying to do. It's so good to have you here. Welcome, everyone, to the Trish Regan Show. And I want to start first with this story coming to us out of New York City. Non-citizens have been awarded the right to vote there in New York City. 800,000 people, green card holders, dreamers, they're going to be able to vote in city elections. Now, this is already happening, actually, in more than a dozen places all over the country, including some parts of California and Vermont and other liberal places. But now it's come to New York City. And so the idea is, if you've been living in New York City as a resident for 30 days, you now have the right to vote in an election. And the left says this is great, we're making history. But other people are, including myself, saying, wait a second here. What's really going on? Because just to be very clear, I mean, it's not like you or I could move to Mexico tomorrow, show up there for 30 days, even if we were legally working and legally living there, and suddenly say, okay, I'm going to vote in a Mexican election. Right? That's not allowed. Now, one of the reasons for that is because, you know, as a citizen, you have a stake in this country's direction. You're kind of here for the long haul, right? In America, once you become a citizen in the United States of America, you're paying taxes for the rest of your life, whether you like it or not, whether you want to move somewhere or not. Somehow, the U.S. is always going to get you. Consider people now that are giving up citizenship and moving to other countries because maybe they see that as a tax advantage, or maybe they don't like the way the country is going. Well, guess what? Uncle Sam, or Uncle Joe in this case, is going to take half of your net worth on your way out the door. If you're a green card holder, doesn't matter. You can leave tomorrow. You can go somewhere else. You're not going to have to pay that penalty. If you're living elsewhere and holding on to your U.S. citizenship, we're the kind of country that still charges you U.S. taxes. Nobody else does that. That's unique to the United States. So given that citizens are on the hook for all this money, given that we're the ones responsible for the bills at the end of the day, don't you think that we ought to be the ones that are deciding the future direction of this country or our cities? I mean, how is it right that somebody comes in, stays 30 days in New York, says, okay, now I'm going to vote in New York City school board elections, and before you know it, the city of New York is dealing with escalating costs because all these people are voting for all these things that they're going to get in, and, you know, not voucher schools, by the way, not school choice, but perhaps massive spending for the school system that goes literally to nowhere. And now taxpayers that are legitimately there are on the hook. I mean, it just doesn't work. And you know, there's a lot of people very worried about this, and I'm one of them. I mean, we're really allowing our country in so many ways to just be whatever. And I think we have to be more proactive and more thoughtful about our future. And so New York City putting 800,000 people into the voting system, well, I guess the idea is they can get their people in. I mean, that's a big part of this, right? And that's what's so sad. All of this comes down to politics. Politics. And it's really pretty disgusting. You know what else is really disgusting is the inflation numbers that we saw. Inflation numbers showing a 6.8% increase in consumer prices. This is the fastest uptick we've seen in nearly 40 years. You're going to go back to June 1982 to see anything like this. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more because this really shows the decline our society is in. But before I get to that, a quick word from one of our sponsors in today's program. I want to tell you a little bit about Novus Society. Novus Society is a wonderful place, a community of liberty-loving givers that can help you jumpstart your philanthropy. Novus Society at Donors Trust. Millennials, they have a lot on their plate right now. They've worked so hard to build their American dream, and they're not going to let go of it, as they should not let go of it. We saw this unfold for sure during the Virginia gubernatorial election, parents making it very clear that freedom in education most definitely matters. Young adults, they aren't just using their voice at the ballot box, however. They're using their voice in a way that affects giving. They're directly giving, and that's where Novus comes in. The Novus Society at Donors Trust is a program for young givers, a way for young people to leverage the fastest growing giving tool on the market so that their gifts have the greatest impact. With Novus Society, young givers have access to a donor-advised fund and a team of advisors to help develop their charitable goals. A donor-advised fund with Novus Society makes giving easy, it makes it secure, it makes it tax advantaged. So go to novussociety.org/Trish, my name, Trish. Again, that's novussociety.org/Trish to see how Novus Society can grow your philanthropy. But again, this is important. Philanthropy is important. Voting's important. Thinking about our future is important right now because we are in the midst of this major decline. I mean, you consider how politicized everything is right now. It shows you the decline that we're really, really and truly in. I think when we see what happened with Jussie Smollett, it's another example of this. Of course, it was announced this week that Jussie is guilty of trying to fake a hate crime. Can you imagine? I mean, just think of that. I mean, this guy was so desperate for attention, but not only was he desperate for attention, he knew what buttons to press. So Jussie Smollett went out there and had this crazy story about being attacked at 2 a.m. while just trying to get a sandwich at 2 a.m. by two white Trump supporters wearing MAGA hats. And they were yelling at him, attacking him, and saying that this is MAGA country. And somehow this story held up, right? The mainstream media was all over it, and our politicians were all over it, and they just immediately believed it. Whatever happened to your, innocent until proven guilty, or in this case, guilty until proven innocent? I'll tell you what I do. I tend to stand back on some of these cases because I have respect for our court system. And I like to wait and see and hear what the jury has to say. And what we found out in this case is what we all were learning along the way, that Jussie Smollett was a fraud and made the entire thing up just for publicity. You would think that politicians, people running for the president of the United States of America, might have enough common sense to actually stand back when this originally happened and think about it instead of going in right out there over their skis. Joe Biden tweeting at the time, "What happened today," in reference to Smollett, "must never be tolerated in our society. We must stand up. Homophobia and racism have no place in our streets." Kamala Harris at the time tweeting, "Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest human beings I know." Well, I am praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern day lynching. That's like some really serious, really strong language. She didn't know any facts about the case. Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, using the same rhetoric, modern day lynching. You see, they tried to seize this moment for their own political gain, just like Smollett was out there trying to seize the mood of the country for his own politicized gain to try and revive his horrific career. So it came to light in February of 2019 that the whole thing was just made up, that none of this was true. And reporters started asking Kamala Harris, for example, about it. Well, Kamala Harris was confronted and she literally, I watched the tape, she totally froze. She had no idea. She acted like she had no idea what they were talking about. And then when they reminded her of her tweet, she, again, in a very frozen way, said, well, we need to get more information. Cory Booker also said, we need to get more information. Well, guys, now you have the information, okay? And if you were responsible politicians, what you would do now is come forward and say, I was wrong. I never, ever should have just believed that. But you know what? The moment had me willing to believe whatever this D-list actor was willing to throw our way. And that was wrong. And it shows you how broken we are as a society. I mean, we really are. We're really broken. And we're broken politically and we're broken economically. We just learned that inflation is at the highest level it's been at in nearly 40 years. You got to go all the way back to the beginning of the Reagan presidency when Paul Volcker had to do everything he could at the Federal Reserve to try and rein in inflation, because that's how bad it is. A 6.8% increase in consumer prices. So I don't care, you may have gotten a 3% raise at work or 4% raise at work. Whoop-de-doo, real wages are down. We saw that in November. They declined 1.4%. Money is being eroded right before our eyes. Our dollars are being eroded because of this inflation. So what do you need to do? You need to protect yourself and your family and your future. And one of the best ways to do that, you've heard me say before, is through gold. A gold-backed IRA, or the actual physical stuff itself. Do you know that $1 million worth of gold can actually fit into a shoebox? Pretty neat, right? So this is something you can have in your home. This is something you can have in your bank. This is something you can have in your bank account. And I encourage you to call Legacy Precious Metals. That's the company I trust for gold investing. They've been in business for a long time. It's family run, and they can help you figure out what you need in your portfolio to protect against all this inflation that I promise you, I've told you for the last year and a half it was coming, it's here, and it will get worse. So do what you can to protect yourself. Call my friends. Use my name. Tell them I sent you. Call them at legacypminvestments.com. Their phone number is 1-866-589-0560. Again, 1-866-589-0560. legacypminvestments.com. Tell them Trish sent you. They will help you out. They will hook you up with what is needed to help safeguard your investments and your future, because the reality is none of this is getting any better. None of this is getting any better because inflation is here to stay. You do have a backlog in the system that's getting even worse right before Christmas. You've got all this demand out there, right? People have had the last year and a half to save up their money. They don't have as much debt right now, so they're willing to go out and spend a little bit if they can find the actual goods. But you can't. This is one of the reasons why used car prices increase more than 30%. Then you consider the fact that, well, we've done everything possible to try and kill our oil industry. And consequently, you got oil prices that have skyrocketed. When you look at this report and you see the energy prices are up 33%, that's tough on everyday Americans. When food prices are going up and energy prices are going up, that hurts. You know what? You know what's not included in the inflation index, and they wiped it out back in the 80s because housing costs were going up so much? Yeah, housing. The roof over your head. They don't even factor that in to the consumer price index anymore. But housing prices have gone way up. So you've got housing way up. You've got food way up. You've got energy way up. Thank you, Joe. This really is, I warned you, a welcome back Carter moment, right? I said this would be Jimmy Carter all over again. A lot of you have made the point that at least Jimmy was sort of heart in the right place. In this particular case, with this particular president, sometimes you got to wonder about that. You consider, as I was just talking about the Smollett case, you consider his reaction, right, with Jussie Smollett versus Kyle Rittenhouse. They're all willing to tar and feather a guy who's trying to defend himself, who might have been killed, defend himself 3-on-1, and yet somehow Jussie was so willing or so deserving of their appreciation. That's really, really messed up. And so when you consider the political consequences, you consider the economic consequences, and it's all happening right now before Christmas, we're not on a good trajectory, okay? Like, he's just not cutting it. And you know what? There's a brand new poll that shows it. The majority of Americans now blame Joe Biden for inflation, as they should, because his policies are driving energy prices higher. His policies actually stoke inflation. When you try and put more money into the system for all kinds of social programs, this Build Back Better stuff, social programs that honestly we don't need. I mean, for goodness sakes, you don't have people working right now. We don't have high unemployment. You do have a lot of demand. So why are we trying to flush more money into the system at a time when we're dealing with record inflation? Heck, you've got even the Federal Reserve pulling back. The Federal Reserve. Jerome Powell admitting that, you know what, this isn't really as transitory as we might have thought. This is really here to stay. And so we can't spend as much money anymore in terms of the $120 billion a month bond buying program that the Fed was involved in. So the Fed's pulling back and Joe Biden wants to go in with more. I'm sorry. That will mean more inflation. And you know what, buddy? If you were smart, and we know you're not, but if you were smart, you would recognize that, Mr. President. And you would know that this is a political disaster. This is why Americans are blaming you. They are blaming you for inflation. Unless you're able to clear it up, you're going to be out of office really fast, as you should be. And Kamala's not going to get the gig. I think we all know that. Just a reminder, everybody, I really want you to subscribe to this show, to this channel. You can listen to the entire audio version of my podcast on Apple iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Do make sure you subscribe to this channel, the video channel on Rumble and on YouTube. And it's so good to have you here. Merry Christmas. I'm going to keep saying that because we might as well, right? I've got a Christmas sweater on even right now, if you're watching. Merry Christmas. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I will see you right back here on Monday.